Kayla B was known as the big sister of one of the most loyal rappers Chicago ever produced, before she became the most controversial family member in all of drill history. King Von's sister just turned 32 years old, and the way she's living right now is wild. Because ever since Von was killed back in November of 2020, his own sister has been going viral for all the wrong reasons. Public beefs with the women who loved him. Pictures of her kissing Chief Keef, a man who grew up with Von but had real problems with him and didn't post a single word when he died. And on top of all that, she's even been spotted around Lou Tim, the man who was charged in her brother's murder before the case was ultimately dropped. Let's break down the full life and story of Kayla B and how the sister of OBlock's biggest star ended up here. And stay with me until the very end, because the last part of this story is the one thing fans say Von would have never, ever forgiven. Once you hear the complete timeline, from the block, to the fame, to the funeral, to everything that came after, you'll understand exactly why the internet cannot stop talking about this woman. Let's get into it. Kayla B is a social media personality and YouTuber from Chicago, best known as the older sister of the late King Von. She was born Kayla Bennett and raised on the south side of Chicago, right in Parkway Gardens on 64th and King Drive, a stretch of buildings the world now knows as OBlock. To understand Kayla, you have to understand where she comes from, because OBlock isn't a regular neighborhood. It's one of the most notorious blocks in America. It's the block that raised Chief Keef. It's the block that raised King Von. And it's the same environment that shaped Kayla from the time she was a little girl. The Bennett household ran deep. Kayla and Von came up together with their siblings, raised mostly around their mother's side, while their father, Walter Bennett, was in and out of prison for most of Von's childhood before he was killed when Von was young. So from the very start, this family knew loss. This family knew the system. And this family knew exactly what it meant to survive in one of the most dangerous zones in Chicago. Growing up in Parkway, Kayla was exposed to everything her little brother was exposed to: the gangs, the shootouts, the funerals, all of it. She watched friends and family get locked up and laid down before she was even grown. And while Von was the one who ended up deep in the streets, catching cases as a teenager and building his name off 64th, Kayla was right there in the same buildings, living the same reality from a different angle. They were close in age and close in life. This was never a distant relationship. By all accounts, Von genuinely loved his big sister, and she loved him back. And that's important to establish, because a lot of people watching the drama today assume these two were never close. That's simply not true. Kayla has told stories over the years about their childhood, about growing up in those buildings together, about the version of Von that existed before the world knew King Von. Before the fame, before the cases, before the beefs, they were just brother and sister trying to make it out of one of the roughest environments in the country. And in that environment, you learn certain rules early. You learn what block you're from. You learn who your people are and who your people's enemies are. You learn that in Parkway, loyalty isn't a suggestion, it's the whole culture. Von absorbed those rules and built his entire life, and eventually his entire music career around them. Kayla, according to the streets, played by a different set of rules entirely, which is exactly what makes everything that came later so hard for fans to understand. Now here's where the story takes its first turn, because the controversy around Kayla B did not start when Von died. It started years before, back when Von was still alive and still in the streets. See, when Kayla was coming up, the war between OBlock and the guys from 63rd was one of the deadliest conflicts in the whole city. This was the OBlock versus STL and Charville era, a beef that took real lives on both sides, including people Von and his guys grew up with. If you were from Parkway, 63rd was enemy territory, plain and simple. Von rapped about it, lived it, and lost friends behind it. But according to people from the city, and stories that circulated around Chicago for years, Kayla had a habit of being exactly where she wasn't supposed to be. Word around the neighborhood was that she was hanging out on 63rd, kicking it with the same guys her brother considered ops, while Von was actively at war with them. Now imagine being Von in that situation. You're putting your life on the line every time you step outside. Your name is attached to one of the most dangerous blocks in America, and your own big sister is posted up with the other side. People from the city talked, and by all accounts, it was a real embarrassment for him. And then came the photo that took it from neighborhood gossip to full internet history. A picture allegedly surfaced, showing Kayla wearing a hoodie with the words OBlock printed on it. Her own brother's block, the block their family came from. The block Vaughn would go on to name his final album after. To this day, people debate that photo. Some say it was exactly what it looked like. Some say there was context missing, and Kayla has had her own explanations over the years. But real or not, the image spread everywhere and it never went away. It planted a seed in people's minds that Kayla moved different from the rest of the family. That she didn't carry the block the way her brother carried it. And that seed would grow into everything that came after, because around that same time, her little brother was about to go from a name in the streets to a name the whole world knew. Everything changed for the Bennett family in 2018. Vaughn had just beat a murder case after sitting in jail. And when he came home, Lil Durk took him under his wing and pushed him toward music. Vaughn took one shot at it and never looked back. In late 2018, he dropped Crazy Story, a track where he told his real street stories over a beat, and the song exploded. It went viral in Chicago first, then the whole country caught on. Within a year, Vaughn went from a name on 64th to one of the hottest new rappers in America. He signed to Durk's label, Only the Family and Empire. Dropped Crazy Story Part 2 and Part 3. Then came the Grandson album. Then LeVon James. And by 2020, he was working on Welcome to OBlock, the project that would cement him as one of the best storytellers drill music ever produced. He had records with Durk, with Polo G, with Lil Baby. Took Her to the O went crazy, Why He Told went crazy. And songs like The Code had the whole industry recognizing that Vaughn wasn't just another drill rapper, he was a movie director with a microphone. Every song was a scene, every verse had characters, and it was all pulled from a life he actually lived. As Vaughn's star rose, so did the whole family's profile, including Kayla's. Being King Von's sister suddenly meant something on the internet. People wanted to know the family, wanted to see the people behind the man. Kayla started building her own following on Instagram and YouTube, making content, showing her personality, and connecting with Vaughn's fan base. And to be fair, during this stretch, things looked good. Whatever tension existed from the old days, Vaughn was rich now, famous now, and pulling his family up with him. His sister had a platform, his mother was taken care of, and OBlock had a new king. For a moment, it looked like the Bennett family story was going to be one of the rare ones with a happy ending. But if you know how these stories go, you already know in this world, the higher you climb, the harder the fall. And the fall came on November 6, 2020. That night, Vaughn and his crew were in Atlanta, leaving the Monaco Hookah Lounge in the early morning hours when they ran into Quando Rondo and his people outside. Vaughn and Rondo had tension that traced back to gang politics, and when the two groups crossed paths in that parking lot, words turned into a fist fight within seconds, and the fist fight turned into gunfire. When the shooting stopped, King Vaughn had been hit multiple times. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and just hours later the news dropped that he didn't make it. Davon Bennett was dead at 26 years old, at the absolute peak of his career.
APD says the gun battle took place in 3 different spots near Trinity Avenue, where a total of 6 people were shot, 3 have died. One of them, a rapper Davon Bennett, who goes by the stage name King Von. GBI says King Von and a group of men left Opium nightclub and went to Monaco Hookah Lounge early Friday morning.
Just 2 days after dropping what would become his final album, the whole hip-hop world stopped. Chicago went into mourning, and back home, the Bennett family was shattered. In those first hours, Kayla's reaction was exactly what you'd expect from a grieving sister. She was on social media pouring her heart out, going live crying, defending her brother's name, and speaking on the people she blamed for his death. The internet rallied behind her. Millions of Vaughn's fans flooded her pages with love and prayers, and almost overnight, Kayla became one of the main public voices for Vaughn's memory. She was doing interviews, calling out Quando Rondo and his circle, and keeping her brother's name trending. And at first, fans appreciated it. They wanted somebody from the family carrying the torch. But grief playing out in public is a dangerous thing because every move gets watched, screenshotted, and judged. In those weeks after Vaughn's death, emotions in the whole circle were at an all-time high. Lil Durk, who was like a big brother to Von, was posting through unimaginable pain and would later pour that grief into his music. OBlock had just lost its biggest star. Quando Rondo's name was the most hated name on the internet, and fans were looking for anybody to blame. In the middle of all that fire, Kayla was one of the loudest voices online. And being the loudest voice in a tragedy is a double-edged sword. Because eventually the smoke stops being aimed at the people connected to your brother's death and starts landing on people who loved him just as much as you did. Within weeks of Von's death, people started noticing that the drama around Kayla was getting louder than the mourning. And the first explosion came from a war with somebody Von had loved. Asian Doll, also known as Asian Da Brat, was King Von's ex-girlfriend and the most well-known relationship of his career. They dated publicly, made music together, broke up, and got back together. And even though they weren't officially together when he passed, everybody knew the history ran deep. So when Von died, Asian Doll was destroyed. She was tweeting through her grief non-stop, talking about how much she loved him and how she never got the chance to say goodbye. And that's where the war started, because Kayla B took issue with how Asian Doll was mourning. From Kayla's side, Asian Doll was an ex, not family. And in Kayla's eyes, she was using Von's death for attention and inserting herself into a family tragedy where she didn't belong. Things boiled over around the time of the funeral. When Asian Doll made it known she wasn't welcomed the way she felt she should have been. She tweeted about not being able to see Von one last time and about being treated like an outsider by the people around him, and Kayla responded with no mercy. The two of them went at it publicly in one of the messiest feuds ever attached to a rapper's death. Kayla accused her of clout chasing off her dead brother's name. Asian Doll fired back that she was the one who really knew Von, that she held him down in real life, and that his own sister was the one turning his death into a circus. It got personal. It got ugly. And it played out in front of millions while Von was barely in the ground. Fans were stuck in the middle, watching two of the closest women in Von's life tear each other apart instead of grieving together. And the crazy part is this beef never really got a clean ending. It just kept flaring up over the years. Anytime Asian Doll spoke on Von, whether it was about his music, his memory, or her time with him, you could count down the minutes before Kayla had something to say about it. And anytime Kayla was in a headline, Asian Doll's fans would pull up the old tweets and reignite the whole thing. Two women who, in a different world, could have leaned on each other through the worst loss of their lives instead became permanent enemies with Von's name stuck in the middle of every exchange. And whichever side you took, one thing was clear. The man's name was attached to non-stop drama within weeks of his passing, and his sister was at the center of it. Now at this point, some of you might be thinking, okay, it's messy, but families fall out with exes all the time. Grief makes people do crazy things, and maybe with time things would calm down and Kayla would settle into simply protecting her brother's legacy. That's what a lot of fans told themselves too. But as messy as that situation was, it was nothing compared to what came next, because the Asian Doll beef was internet drama. What Kayla did after that touched the actual street history her brother died behind. To understand the next chapter, you need to understand Chief Keef's place in this story. Keef is the reason the world even knows what OBlock is. Before Von blew up, Keef was the one who put Parkway Gardens on the map back in 2012. And the block itself got its nickname from O.D. Perry, one of their guys who was killed. Keef and Von came from the same buildings, the same environment, the same people. On paper, they were supposed to be family, but somewhere along the way, things between them went left. It was never a full public war in the records, but the tension was real, and the streets knew about it. Keef had moved out to California years earlier. There was distance, there were subliminals, and there were moments in interviews and online where it became obvious these two were not on good terms. And the clearest proof came on the worst day possible. When Von died, damn near everybody in hip-hop posted something. Artists who barely knew him posted tributes, but Chief Keef posted nothing, not one word for a man from his own block. Fans noticed immediately, and that silence basically confirmed that whatever issues Keef and Von had, they were never squashed. Von died with that tension still in the air. So now, with all that context, you can understand why the internet lost its mind when pictures surfaced of Kayla B kissing Chief Keef. King Von's own sister booed up with the man who couldn't even give her brother a rest in peace post. The man her brother reportedly had unresolved problems with in his final years. When those pictures dropped, social media went into a complete meltdown. Fan pages posted the photos next to Von's face. Her comments turned into a war zone, with Day One Von fans asking how she could do that to his memory. And through all of it, Kayla didn't fold. No apology, no explanation that satisfied anybody, no backing down. She moved like she didn't owe the internet, or her brother's legacy, a single answer. And what made it hit even harder was the timing. This wasn't decades later when wounds had healed. Von's fan base was still actively grieving, still streaming "Welcome to OBlock," still treating his memory like something sacred. So to them, watching his sister link up with Keef of all people felt like watching somebody walk over everything Von stood for while the candles were still lit. For a lot of fans, that was the moment they gave up on her. But believe it or not, there was still one more line left to cross, and she crossed it. Lou Tim. If you follow Von's story, you know that name. Timothy Leaks, known as Lou Tim, was part of Quando Rondo's circle, and days after the Atlanta shooting, he was arrested in the hospital and charged with King Von's murder. For years, his name and Von's name were tied together in the worst way possible. The case dragged on, and eventually the charges against him were dropped, with the situation being treated as a shootout where self-defense applied. So legally, the man walked free. But in the eyes of Von's fans and everybody connected to OBlock, Lou Tim will forever be the man who was charged in King Von's death. Quando Rondo kept him around publicly afterward, which already had fans furious for years. So imagine the reaction when posts and clips started circulating that appeared to show Kayla B around Lou Tim, moving in the same circles like there was no history at all. Whether every clip was exactly what it looked like or not, the fact that this was even a conversation broke the internet's brain. Grown men who grew up on Von's music were leaving paragraphs in her comments. People who defended her through the Asian doll beef. People who gave her a pass on Chief Keef tapped all the way out because everything else could be written off as messy internet behavior. But being anywhere near the man who was charged in your own brother's murder, to Von's fans, there's no explaining that. Now, Kayla never denied being who she is or moving how she moves. Her position, whenever she's addressed the criticism over the years, has basically been that she's grown, that the internet doesn't know her real life, doesn't know her family's private business, and doesn't get a say in who she associates with. And look, from her perspective, maybe there are layers to these situations that outsiders will never see. But perception is reality on the internet, and the perception was catastrophic. Not only was Kayla dealing with the backlash from the Keef situation, she was now carrying the weight of this too. Plus the years of old stories about 63rd and the hoodie photo all getting dug back up at once. Every controversy she ever had came back around, and her name became one of the most argued about names in the whole drill scene. The pressure would have made most people log off and disappear for a year. And instead of stepping back from the spotlight, she did the opposite. She leaned all the way in. Which brings us to today and how Kayla B is living at 32 years old. She's still all over social media, still doing her YouTube thing, still going live, still dropping content, and still finding her way into a new controversy every few months like clockwork. Every time her name trends, it's attached to drama. A new beef, a new clip, a new screenshot. And it's not like she's hiding from any of it, she leans in. When the internet piles on her, she responds. When people bring up Von, she claps back. When a situation goes viral, she addresses it on her own terms, usually in a way that pours gasoline on the fire instead of putting it out. She's turned being the most criticized woman in the drill world into a full-time career. And here's the uncomfortable truth: it works. The drama gets views. The controversy gets followers. Every time she does something the internet says she shouldn't do, her platform gets bigger. There are people who genuinely believe that's the whole strategy, that being King Von's controversial sister pays better than being his quiet, respectful sister ever would. Now, to be fair, there's another way to look at it. Some people say Kayla is just a grown woman living her life. She lost her brother in the most public way imaginable, and nobody gets to tell her how to grieve, who to date, or who to be around. She never asked to be held to the standard of Von's legacy, and internet strangers don't get a vote in her personal life. That's a real argument, and her supporters stand on it. But then there's the other side, where most of Von's fans stand, and their point is simple. King Von's entire identity was loyalty. That's not an opinion, that's his whole catalog. This is a man who named his final album Welcome to OBlock, whose every song was about holding your side down and never breaking bread with the opposition. And that's why fans are so confident when they say Von would have never approved of any of this. Not the old days on 63rd, not the alleged hoodie. Not the public war with Asian Doll weeks after his death. Definitely not the pictures kissing Chief Keef, a man who couldn't even acknowledge his passing. And absolutely not being anywhere near Lou Tim. If Von were alive, none of this happens. And that's the tragedy underneath all the drama. His absence didn't just leave a hole in the rap game, it removed the one person whose opinion would have actually stopped all of this. At the end of the day, this is a sad situation. No matter how you look at it, a family from one of the hardest blocks in America finally made it out through Von's talent. And instead of that legacy bringing them together, his death scattered everything. Von's passing was a huge loss to Chicago, to hip-hop, and most of all to his family. He was 26 years old, with his best music arguably still ahead of him, a son and daughters who needed him, and a career that was about to reach another level. Welcome to OBlock went on to chart higher after his death than anything he dropped while he was alive, which tells you exactly how much bigger he was about to become. And what could have been for the family is the part nobody talks about. If Von were still here, maybe the beefs get squashed privately. Maybe his sister never ends up in headlines like these. Maybe the Bennett name stays attached to music instead of madness. Fans will probably never know exactly why Kayla moves the way she moves. It could have been grief. It could have been money. It could have been years of old tension inside that family the public never fully understood. Or it could have been a combination of all of it. What we do know is that King Von's legacy lives on through his music, through OBlock, and through the millions of fans who still play his songs every single day. And his sister, at 32 years old, is living proof that when a star dies young, the story doesn't end, it just gets messier. So now I want to hear from you. Is Kayla B dead wrong for how she's been moving since Von passed? Or is she a grown woman who doesn't owe the internet anything? Let me know down in the comments because I read every single one of them. And if you made it this far, do me one favor, hit like on this video, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell because stories like this one drop every week and you don't want to miss the next. Rest in peace, King Von. I'll see you in the next one.